Welcome back, Terrifics. This is the Michael Artsis Show. I'm Michael Artsis. You are the Terrifics. You make BeTerrific special. I promised you all week, I've been promising you this special guest, and we haven't been able to put it together. You know, Skype, it's not the easiest technology in the world. It's a good technology, especially when it works, but it's not the easiest to get working. Well, we've got it working, and we've got Alan Dean Foster joining us. You know this guy well. He's a tremendous author, and he is the guy who wrote the original Star Wars novel. It's an interesting story. I keep saying that to you because it's not like the normal story, right? The normal way would be somebody would write a novel, they'd like it, they'd turn it into a screenplay and make a movie. And then sometimes they take the movie poster and they put it on the book, right? And they reprint the book, especially for softcover. In this case, the screenplay was written, the movie was made, and then Alan Dean Foster was charged with writing the first novel, and then subsequent novels, of course, and all the backstories. So here is a guy who had to take something that already existed and was like locked into position, and then had to rewrite all these other things and expand upon it, and had the pressure of it being Star Wars and George Lucas. That's got to be amazing to me. Alan, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
Tell me about what it was like. I mean, you went to, I think it started, first of all, you're a graduate of Masters from UCLA. That's pretty cool. You're a Bruin.
Yes, I am.
I'm a sports guy, so that means a lot to me. I don't know why.
Well, I was a year behind Jabbar, and I had 2 classes with him, and he never said a word to anybody that I saw.
At all?
Not at all.
He was Lou Alcindor back then, wasn't he?
That's right. Shy, sat in the back of the class, and I was shy, so I was too shy to say anything to him. And I didn't realize it was because he was homesick for New York the whole time.
Wow. That's pretty amazing. Was he, I mean, it must have been, you knew this guy would be an NBA star, didn't you, at that point? Or did you not know? You were just like, he's a good basketball player. He's very tall and lanky.
Now, back then they used to have freshman games. The freshman team used to play junior colleges at every university. And the first time the freshmen beat the UCLA varsity, who were national champion players, you had a pretty good idea there were some good freshmen on that team, of which he was obviously the most prominent.
Yeah. Well, he had an amazing career, and not only on the basketball court. I mean, he's done well after the court, too, and I always love that he was an airplane. I don't know why. To me, it's like the funniest thing. Hey, kid, I'm not Kareem, you know?
Yeah, it was always obvious double.
Hey, my dad says you're not very good at rebounding.
I'm 5'10". What does he want from me? Oh, he means Jabbar. Okay.
Yeah. But I got the joke. I was on top of it. All right. So, you, if I understand this correctly, you're somehow, first of all, you're offered $5,000 to write this first book, which, I mean, today that wouldn't be a lot of money, especially not for Star Wars. But back then it was a decent amount, was it not? You were ghostwriting.
Well, to be perfectly honest with you, that's the first time I've heard the actual amount mentioned, probably in 40 years. I actually don't remember the amount of money, but I'm going to take your word for it because I'm not going back through 40 years worth of old checks to make sure you're right. So we'll just assume you're correct. The thing with Star Wars, with the novelization, the book version of the film, is that was, as is so often the case with novelizations, a work for hire. And in many cases, in a work for hire, you don't get any royalties. So it's a flat fee. It's, come paint my house and this is how much you get. I don't give you royalties if the neighbors all like the paint job.
Right, and even if they pay me to drive by it, you still don't get royalties.
That's right. But I was delighted to have it at the time. I was delighted to work with George Lucas. I knew him from American Graffiti, and he was a fine filmmaker, and I thought it would be a fun project.
So,
little did anybody know.
So somehow you get contacted. Did you get contacted, or did your agent send out, hey, this guy would be great for this, or how did that happen?
Well, I had a number of original novels published by Random House Del Rey, at that time Ballantine Books still. And I'd also done a couple of movie novelizations, one for Dark Star, which was John Carpenter and Dan O'Bannon's first film, interestingly enough, and the other for a really terrible Italian film called Luana. And on the basis of those couple of projects and the fact that I was starting to do novelizations of the Saturday Morning Star Trek series, the animated series, I was asked if I would be interested in doing the novelization of this little upcoming science fiction film that nobody knew anything about. And as soon as I heard Lucas's name mentioned, I said, sure. So my agent, the publisher contacted my agent. After I said sure to the publisher, my agent contacted George's people. I think it was Tom Pollock, who was George's lawyer at the time. I went down from Big Bear Lake, where I was living at the time in California, had a brief meeting with Mr. Pollock, and then they said okay, and they sent me out to Industrial Light and Magic, which at that time was a rented warehouse on Kester Avenue in Van Nuys, and met with a few people and hung out with George for a little bit. I was frankly astonished that he had any time to devote to something like an ancillary right, like the novelization.
Sure.
But he did.
Now,
and, on that basis, I was asked to do the book.
And you were asked to do the book, but from what I understand, you actually watched the film with George for the first time. He asked you to sit with him and watch it, and you went to, from what I understand, a movie theater to watch it. Is that correct?
No, that probably refers to the cast and crew screening.
Okay.
Which was in a rented theater, I think the El Capitan, on Hollywood Boulevard. And it was the first time I had seen the film at all. I wrote the book many months before the film was finished, using the screenplay and some of Ralph McQuarrie's pre-production art. That was all I saw.
Wow. I mean, I would have thought that he would have shown you dailies, or he would have shown you some of the stuff. I know it was all top secret, especially back then, and it was also, I mean, it's a different world. Today, we could send you digital cuts even with the graphics and the CG in there, but back then it was probably a lot harder to do that, but I would have thought he would have wanted you to see some of the actual cuts, but you saw none of that and had to build off of, you know, basically some artwork, which I'm sure was phenomenal, and I guess really like storyboards, and then the script.
I was able to see maybe 3-4 minutes of rough cuts of things like the fight between the Millennium Falcon and the TIE fighters. No sound, no music.
Wow.
No, you know, you just have to kind of fill in the blanks. But even that little bit was sufficient to tell me that for the first time somebody was going to try and do space opera, as it's called, right. So I did get to see a little bit, but that was all.
Did you know though, I mean, you say, oh, somebody was going to do it right, but did you know at that point, like, this is a home run? I'm looking at these cuts, even with no music. Did you know? Because I feel like, all right, this could be a fun project. All right, this looks cool. Yeah, I hope it works.
It's a funny thing. The first time I read the script, the one that was given to me to work from, I thought, this is great, this is great, this is great. But they're never going to get any of this on screen the way it's written down on paper. If they can get it on screen, they're really going to have something. Then I saw those couple of minutes, just very brief stuff, and I thought, this looks really good. It would be nice to see it with music and special effects and sound effects, but it still looks really good. But I actually felt when I read the script that if they could get what was down on paper up on the screen, they'd have something special.
Now, did you feel when you saw the movie that it was exactly the way you read it and envisioned it on that manuscript?
No, it was better.
Really?
It was better because there's so much that the film, well, it's a visual experience.
Sure.
The visual experience when you read something is just in your head. And a lot of times, sometimes that's better. But in this case, what I finally saw on screen at that cast and crew screening was much better than anything I had envisioned.
Awesome. I can imagine. I mean, you know, it's hard, you know, especially for younger people today, to go back and think about the way that movies were made back then, what was out, and how game-changing this was. I mean, you talk about the sound effects, you talk about the music, you talk about the special effects. This stuff was nowhere near where it is today. Back then, it's not, and Star Wars was so far beyond anything else that was out there that it really, really changed the game and shook things up and was a masterpiece, and it deserves a lot more credit than it gets for doing all that. Now, so then do you know, you've written the book at this point, you see the final movie, now what?
Well, I was also asked to write the first sequel book to Star Wars, which was a book called Splinter the Mind's Eye.
I mean, it seems to me like this would be so much fun. I'd be so excited for it. On the other hand, I'd be so nervous because I feel like I have the weight of the world on my shoulders, like, don't screw this up.
Nobody knew at the time. When I was writing, I wrote the sequel book before the film came out also. So there was no wait. There was no Star Wars. The only Star Wars that existed was in cans it was on reels that was being processed uh, by Marcia Lucas and George, and there was no phenomenon. The phenomenon didn't happen until the film was released. But both of the books that I wrote at that time were written before the film came out.
That's amazing. Like,
So there was no wait.
it's amazing though. I mean, did you feel after you saw the film like this work, your books worked, or did you feel you had maybe you missed something, or you had to go back and tweak it? Because that's what I wouldn't even enjoyed the film. I would have been sitting there going, did that check out? Does that work? Did they do this differently? Oh, is there a line that got changed that now screws this up?
No, I was so blown away, like everybody was at the cast and crew screening. Remember, that's the first time that a lot of people who've worked on the film have a chance to actually see the completed film all put together with the music and the effects and everything else. I completely forgot while I was watching the film that I was in a tiny way responsible for a small part of the Star Wars, the whole Star Wars universe. I just lost myself in the film. When I came out afterwards, I thought, well, maybe I could have done this a little differently, and maybe I should have done that relationship a little differently. But at the time I was seeing the film, I didn't think that at all.
And was Lucas thrilled with what you did?
Uh, we had a meeting at Universal where George was renting space because there was no Skywalker Ranch, obviously, at the time.
Sure.
It was myself, Gary Kurtz, the man in charge of publicity and promotion for the film, Charlie Lippincott, and we were discussing Splinter the Mind's Eye, what George wanted changed in that before it came out, and a couple of other things. And in the course of the conversation, George stopped and said, by the way, I'm giving you a 0.5% royalty on the book, meaning the novelization.
Wow.
And I said, you don't have to do that, George. I signed a contract. I'm perfectly happy with my contract. And he said, no, you did a good job. I want you to have it.
Wow.
So I kind of shrugged my shoulders and thought, well, I got a 0.5% royalty on a book. It's a novelization of a movie that maybe nobody will go see. But the gesture impressed me. The gesture was really sweet. And as it turned out, the 0.5% was worth a couple of bucks over the years. So
I bet it was.
It was nice that way too.
Now, have any of the books you've written been used to create the manuscripts going forward? So obviously you came onto the project after the first manuscript was written, but then weren't you very involved in Return of the Jedi? Wasn't that taken a lot from your novels?
No, nothing to do with any of the films, including the first one or any of the subsequent ones. There are people who say that certain things in the first two books might have influenced certain things in the next two films, but I'm not the person to ask about that. If that happened, then I'm happy that it happened. I'm glad if I influenced something one way or the other, that's fine, and if I didn't, that's fine too. But I certainly had no direct involvement.
Right, and they didn't actually take the book and one of the books and make it into a manuscript. What about you were a ghostwriter? I mean, it took a long time for you to even get acknowledgement for doing this. Isn't that right?
Yeah, it was in the contract that George's name would be on the cover of the book, and that was fine with me. It's his story, not my story. But it was also in the contract that I couldn't say that I'd written it.
Wow.
And that's fine too. That's what you do if you're hired to be essentially a ghostwriter. And the only unfortunate thing is, for many years, there were a number of people who recognized or thought they recognized some of my stylistic elements in the novelization. My name's on the Splinter of the Mind's Eye, of course. And they'd meet me at conventions and things and say, you sure you didn't write this? This reads kind of like the way you write. And some of these were old friends, and I would have to lie to their faces and say, nope, I had nothing to do with that. Nope. Many years passed, as you correctly point out, and the first real book on Lucas's work came out, called Skywalking: The Life and Times of George Lucas, in which the author of the book inadvertently, I assume, let drop the fact that I had ghostwritten the novelization of the first film, after which point it seemed kind of silly for anybody to go walking around denying it. And my agents got a release saying, yes, from Lucasfilm saying, yeah, you might as well go ahead and admit to it now, or confess to it, however you want to put it.
Do you talk to George at all now at this point? You guys have conversations somewhat regularly?
I haven't talked to George in many, many years. George has many people who want to talk to him. I have this gut feeling that George really likes going on picnics where nobody recognizes him and nobody talks to him except his lovely new wife, and that he's perfectly happy with that arrangement. If he wanted to talk to me, he'd pick up the phone and say hi, and I'd say hi, and it would be like 40 years hadn't passed.
You know,
But
it's funny because, you know, I've got some friends who are in the public spotlight, and they say to me, "Why don't you pick up the phone more and call me?" And I talk a lot, and I talk to people all the time, and I always feel like I don't want to bother them, and that's what I say. You know, one of these guys is Darryl Strawberry, former New York Met, Yankee, and we were sitting at breakfast one day, and he's like, "Mike, why didn't you?" I was going through, I had just gone through something, and he said, "Why didn't you call me?" And I'm like, "You're Darryl Strawberry," and he goes, "So what?" And his wife, and I'm like, "But you're Darryl Strawberry." And he's like, "So what? I'm your friend." And his wife's like, "Honey, you're Darryl Strawberry. Like, I mean, I know that you want Mike to call you, and you know you want Mike to call you, but he doesn't want to bother you because you have a lot of people pulling at you." And I was like, "Yeah, I mean, what am I going to do? Pick up the phone and be like, 'Hey, D, you won't believe the day I had?'" And he's like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah." And so
well,
sometimes we don't know when people want us to call them, but I would approach it kind of the same way. I wouldn't be calling Lucas every 5 minutes.
no, because everybody else is,
Yeah.
and everybody's trying to sell him something.
But sometimes I think that a guy like Lucas or a guy like Strawberry or a guy like whoever wants you to call them because everybody else is trying to sell them something. They just want to like, "Hey, what's up, brother? How you doing? Hey, did you catch the blah 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 blah?"
Well, if I had his phone number, I'd give him a call.
There you go.
But you know, I probably have to go through the NSA to get his phone number. If I wanted to
Yeah.
do it, if it was deeply important that I talk to him for some reason, I could get a hold of Lucasfilm, I could get a hold of Disney, and we would work it out, and something would happen. But you know, what am I going to say? Hi, George, how you been? How's the last 40 years been for you? You ever going to make those small experimental films that you told me in 1975 you wanted to make? And after a while, the conversation, which he did, and after a while, the conversation would fade away, and
What
he
what
would pay attention to real life.
what were those small experimental films?
Uh, in the course of talking to George at that meeting at Industrial Light and Magic in Van Nuys, I'm trying to think like anybody would. I don't know this guy. How am I going to make small talk? I mean, it's fine when he's showing me the Death Star, but how am I going to make small
And
talk?
part of it
So
is you have to sell yourself, right? It's not just about like, I mean, you have to make small talk because you have to connect because you have to sell yourself. You have this small window to do it, right?
well, I thought that when I went in, that's only natural.
Right.
But after we'd been talking for about 3 minutes, it suddenly became all about the film and all about the project and mutual excitement. And I didn't feel any need to, you know, say, you know, how's your Uncle Joe? And what does he think of the film? But I did, when he wasn't telling me about the film, it's like, well, you know, what do I say to make friends? So I said, what are you going to do if this film flops?
Wow.
And he said, well, I think I've got enough money from American Graffiti. I'll be all right. Meaning future income. And so
Right,
forth.
right, yeah, yeah.
So then I said, well, what are you going to do if it's a big success? And he said, I'd like to make small experimental films. And he got distracted. He made big experimental films.
But what I mean, were there any? Did he say like, "I've got this idea for a film"? Blah 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 blah. No, he didn't tell you any of that. He just said, "I'd like to make small experimental films."
Didn't have time. Like I said before,
Yeah.
I was astonished he had any time for me at all.
Now, do you have a favorite book that you've written or a favorite moment in one of these books that you say, "Wow, that was just awesome," and that's all me. It doesn't have to, you know, it was something I came up with because you had to come up with a lot of the backstory, a lot of the technology, a lot of the all sorts of stuff that you know wasn't necessarily told through the first film.
Well, a lot of it was there. Enough of it was there to pick up with. But specifically in response to your question about a particular moment, Splinter the Mind's Eye, which was the first spin-off novel or the first expanded universe novel, was an original novel utilizing characters from and settings from Star Wars and trying not to contradict anything that was in Star Wars. Trying. So it was an original novel. And if I had to pick a particular moment from that I really liked, it was when there's a fight at the end between Darth Vader and Luke and Leia are trapped at this temple, and Luke gets hurt, and Leia picks up the lightsaber.
That's
Fights Vader.
That's pretty cool.
And if you kind of filter down through the decades, you know, what goes around comes around in a certain way. I'm not going to say anything for anybody who hasn't seen the film yet, even though it's out now, technically. But it's nice when you get this little frisson that, you know, maybe something you did back in the Jurassic era makes it all the way back forward again, back to the present date, even if it's in a completely different form.
You know, I love that you just said that nugget, and I hope it doesn't spoil it for anybody, but I totally picked up on that. I could read between the lines, so to speak. And I love that, as you said, like, you know, something that happened for you so long ago is still being looked at and kind of translated. And I mean, you've seen the film, I imagine? The Force
No,
Awakens?
I'll be seeing it for the first time Friday.
Are you excited?
Sure.
I feel like, to me, this is okay. So this is what I feel, and maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like the first three movies were unbelievable. They blew everybody's mind. The next three movies were, the expectations were up here. Maybe it came in here, but partly because the expectations were up here, right? The first film had expectations down here and came in here, right? So I think that the last three films didn't necessarily meet expectations. It doesn't mean they were bad films. It just means that they didn't meet the expectations. The bar had been raised so high. I feel like this is the opportunity, especially getting J.J. Abrams involved and how creative he is, that this is the, I want to say reboot, but I think it's so overused, and I hate saying that especially because a lot of reboots are terrible. But I feel like this is the opportunity to kind of start over and allow Disney to come in, allow the creative minds around Disney, allow J.J. Abrams in, and kind of retool it, reboot it. And to me, it's either going to be unbelievable and we're going to, you know, continue to enjoy some more success from Star Wars, or this is going to be the one where we go, I guess we're going to have less people going and going and going and going, and it's going to go down. You know, I feel like it's right, like, hindering on that peak, and does it go up or does it go down? That's my feeling, and I do feel it's going to go up.
Well, based on the initial responses from people who've seen the film, the top critics rating on Rotten Tomatoes this morning was 97%, and the want to see was 99%. So I have a feeling you're right when you put your hand up.
I mean, it's not like I went out of the box for that, but I will tell you there have been a lot of critics so far who have not liked the film, but I don't care what critics have to say. And I was surprised by that. I actually thought the critics were going to jump on board with this because critics love to be right? And if they say, if they say it's going to be a huge success, well, you can look at that a million different ways. No matter what, it's going to be a box office success, because even if people don't like it and the next one they don't maybe go to as much, this one they're going to go see this one. So it's going to be a box office success. So if they say it's going to be a success, they're right. And then if they say it's going to be a success and it's a good movie, the chances are more likely that they'll be right there too. But a lot of them have been saying, it's just okay, or it's not very good, or I was surprised it wasn't that good. And I'm surprised by that, but I also think that that's actually a sign that it's phenomenal, because if you look at the movies that I've loved over my life, I don't think any critic has ever said that they liked the movie.
Well, the people I've talked to, everybody loves it.
No, I think the fans, but you're talking about, like, Rotten Tomatoes is the fans. You're talking about
No.
Really?
You go to there's a section on Rotten Tomatoes just for top critics.
Okay.
It's just major critics, newspaper, film critics. Ends up with Variety and Hollywood Reporter at the bottom. All the major papers outside the United States. Eventually, you take a peek over there and you'll see what
Well, I will, and I love. Janny puts up 99.9% say they're going to see it. Well, I mean, yes, there's no doubt about that. And I think it's going to be phenomenal. And I'm telling you, I think that I've seen some major publications saying, their critics saying it's not that good. But I love this then. I love critics I want a critic to be honest. I don't want a critic to just say it's going to be terrible, to be different, or to get some attention because, I always think the critics think like they need to say something different than people expect to stand out. So you have had an illustrious career. I mean, it's not just Star Wars. Is Star Wars, though, your favorite project?
No, my favorite project is my own original
Humanix?
stuff.
That would be Humanix?
Well, that's part of it, the Humanix Commonwealth, and the Spellsinger books and my short stories. There's a lot of other stuff out there, and hopefully when somebody picks up a novelization, they also go looking for my original work as well.
Well, I mean, you've written so much. I mean, we could spend an hour just talking about what you've written. Is there something that you have written that you sit there and go, this is my absolute favorite, I think it's my finest work?
No, and I don't think that the creator of the work is the right person to ask that question. Tchaikovsky didn't think thought the Nutcracker Suite was one of the worst things he ever wrote, or the Nutcracker Ballet. And maybe it wasn't his best, but it certainly wasn't his worst.
Right.
And so you need an outside perspective for this sort of thing. Like Moby Dick wasn't a big success, was kind of a flop when it came out in the United States. It was a big hit in Britain, but it didn't do so well in the United States. And now we think of it as one of the greatest American novels ever written. You need the perspective of time and other people.
Right.
Sure, there are books that are personal favorites, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're my best work. You got to leave that to other people and people looking, from the outside.
Well, what would be your personal favorite?
Well, there's an early book called Midworld,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a recent book called Sagramanda, which is set in a city of 100 million people in India. I was in India for a month, and I thought, well, what am I going to write about? And there are cities in India like Calcutta and Mumbai. Nobody knows how many people are there. They literally don't know how many people live in those cities. And I thought, well, what if you move forward in the future a little bit? There's 100 million people in the city. How do you run a city of 100 million people? I mean, just the practical aspects of it, the police, the fire, security, what's a day like? Who might be living in a city like that? That's one of the things that's most enjoyable about science fiction. You get to expand on reality in any way you like.
Do you do research for it? Because I would imagine you want it to feel somewhat like, this is how I like my science fiction. I want it to seem like it's plausible. Like I might be able to expand my mind, and it's one of the things I actually don't like about Star Wars is there's one part of it that is just way too much fantasy for me. It's too far-fetched. I can't imagine that in my lifetime or 4 more lifetimes we'll get to that point. But I do like Star Wars. I'm not saying I don't like it, but I'm saying that's one of the things where. But most times I like science fiction that I think is more realistic and attainable. And for that, I would imagine you have to do research. So do you have to do research for your science fiction at all, or do you just go, hey, I think it'd be cool to have a death ray, so we'll have a death ray?
No, I never do that, no matter how far in the future it's set. I try to ground all of my science fiction, the fantasy aside, but all of my science fiction in as much real science and real history and real sociology as I possibly can. If I'm doing something more along the lines of what you like, near future science fiction, I have a series of stories called Montezuma Strip stories, which are all set on the US-Mexican border about 70, 80 years in the future.
I love it.
And centers around a detective named Angel Cardenas, and you deal with near future technology, which is much more difficult to deal with than far future technology. Like, for example, you said death ray. You want to do a death ray 1,000 years from now. You say it's a death ray and it's powered by whatever, and it does whatever. And as long as you use very, very basic physics, nobody can object to it.
Right.
But if you want a death ray 80 years in the future, you damn well better explain how the thing works, and it better have some real grounding in existing optics and existing electronics. Otherwise, you're going to look like an idiot.
So you have to do a lot of research.
Yes, and what's funny is the closer the story is to the present day, the more research you have to do.
Right.
People would think it'd be the other way around, but it's not.
So how do you do research for something like that? Because, I mean, the thing is, what do you do? You're going to call up, who are you going to call? Who are you going to find out? You're not going to the Consumer Electronics Show and finding, whatever your new tech is, because if you do, it's tomorrow's tech, not, even if you looked 8 years out, that's not 80 years out.
That's right. Again, near future is harder than far future, but just as an example, in Montezuma Strip, a lot of it takes place in what in a police procedural today would be considered the underground. Well, you have an example where Canada, the United States, and Mexico are now bound together in something called the North American Union. But this takes place on the old US-Mexican border, so you got a lot of street slang. So what I had to do for that to make it realistic, instead of just picking up an 8th grade English science text, English Spanish text, was take as much I found a book on Spanish slang, Mexican slang specifically, and I started combining words from English and Mexican slang to create this street language for this, street people, the kid gangs, that sort of thing.
Sure.
For example, the bad guys are called ninlocos, which comes from loco, from Spanish meaning
Sure.
crazy, and nin also from niña, from meaning kid.
Sure.
And there's you create Spanish English words, put them all together, And the characters in the book, the main book is a novel. There are 5 shorter stories, but the main book's a novel from Warner called The Mocking Program.
Mm-hmm.
And the editor thought, this is really nice, but nobody's really going to understand what you're saying unless they happen to be well versed in Mexican street slang, which really narrows your audience. So we put a glossary in the back of the book for all the terms that I invented that are used in the book.
Nice.
Now that's a kind of research that a lot of people don't think about.
Right.
People say, well, you research the science and you research the technology. Nobody thinks about researching language.
Sure.
Researching psychology, researching economics.
It's actually a really intelligent way to do it. It's really smart. I like it, and it's something I think most people don't think of. And I like the way you did it, because you didn't just make up words, randomly. You actually had a purpose behind it, and the way you did it, I like that a lot. And it's challenging. It's how long does it take you to write a book?
An original novel, once I get the general idea and plot outline in my head, takes about 4 months.
Yeah. What? That's not bad at all. 4 months. That seems like a short amount of time. How about the Star Wars stuff? How long did it take you for the original 2 books? I mean, you probably didn't have that long because they're making a movie.
Well, the studios, even back then, and even more so today, because films tend to be cut and recut right up until weeks, literally a couple of weeks sometimes before the actual release date, thanks to digital tech. They want the book yesterday. The publishers still have to go to the studios and say, look, we have to edit the book, we have to copy edit the book, we have to print the book, we have to get the dust jacket made, we have to get the books bound, we have to put them on trucks and trains and ship them to cities where they get distributed from warehouses to bookstores. We can't do this in 3 or 4 weeks. So they like to have, when they can do it, like to have 10 to 12 months lead time. That doesn't happen with a novelization.
Right.
Generally they'll say you have 3 months from the time you get the materials to turn in the finished manuscript.
Wow.
And then after that, there's always changes coming in these days. And it's very nice if you can incorporate the changes into the book so that people who are reading the novelization won't go look at something and say, hey, this character's blonde in the movie. Why has he got black hair in the book? Because people pick up on everything.
Sure. So how long did you have, though? You had three or 4 months to do Star Wars?
6 weeks.
They couldn't even give you
6 to 8 weeks. Yeah.
They couldn't even give you the 3 or 4 months. Wow. All right, Janny's got a question. He's watching in Finland. We're live right now on BeTerrific.com, and you can reach out to us at BeTerrific TV. You can also join our Slack chat. Connect at BeTerrific.com. Your name, your email, and you can join the Slack chat. Here's the deal. Janny's got a question. He says, in Splinter of the Mind's Eye, you have Luke and Leia having a romantic relationship, and then in Return of the Jedi, we find out that they're brother and sister. What happened there? Did you not know? Were you not clued in? Were you surprised when this happened? Or, yeah. And has there been a subsequent rewrite?
Okay. There hasn't been a rewrite.
Yeah.
Star Wars has always been, like most ongoing serials that are not based on original material, like books or plays, an evolving story process. And people have general ideas that they want to put into the films, but there were no 6 completed screenplays, let's say, when George Lucas started working on Star Wars. That's just a natural evolutionary storytelling process. And though I never asked him about it, most people would suspect that somewhere during the course of the making of The Empire Strikes Back, George decided that Princess Leia should be Luke's sister instead of a love interest. Because even if you look at some of the material that was photographed for The Empire Strikes Back, there's some stuff in there that could be interpreted as a non-sibling relationship between Luke and Leia.
Sure.
So when I wrote Splinter of the Mind's Eye, bearing in mind it was before even the first film came out, I didn't know that. All I had to go on really was the scene in Star Wars where Luke grabs Leia and they're going to swing across the chasm inside the Death Star, and she gives him a very non-sisterly kiss.
Well, I mean,
okay. So it's a competition here between Luke and Han Solo for the affections of the princess.
Sure.
Which story-wise at that point makes perfect sense.
Absolutely.
So I hope that answers the question. And please go have some nice reindeer stew for me down on the waterfront in Helsinki.
There you go, Jenny. Wow. Now, do you ever wonder why George didn't say to you, "Hey, I read the novel. It's great. This is the one thing you have wrong. We got to change it," or you think it just happened on the fly? Or I mean, you said maybe it was during Empire Strikes Back he figured that out.
Yeah, no, I think it was a later process, a
Okay.
later decision. Just like making Darth Vader Luke's father.
Right. So you don't. That wasn't an original concept in your like. I don't mean original. Obviously, it's an original idea. It wasn't part of the initial plan.
Not as far as anything that I saw, no.
Yeah. Wow. That's interesting. Actually, that's very interesting. What do you think made him do that? It just that would be an enormous plot twist that would be awesome.
Yeah, I think so. And then the rest of the story developed from there. But you have this responsibility as a filmmaker, not also as a writer, but it's much worse if you're a filmmaker, that if you have a huge success, not just a success, but a huge success, and people want to do sequels and make more films, there's this constant need to top yourself.
Well, that's what I said before. The expectation was here for for the next three, instead of being down here, maybe.
The pressure is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And it's one reason I'm glad I don't have
it. So also, we got a couple more questions from the Slack chat I want to get to, and then I got a couple more questions for you myself, and I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Sure.
We're blowing off our commercials right now, but we can do that because it's BeTerrific, and we're doing it for the Terrifics. So some of the viewers have noticed you've got this nice shrine behind you, a lot of fun things. We can't necessarily tell exactly what it is, but walk us through that a little bit, and then there's a question based on that. But walk us through what you have back there.
Well, there's a lot of books, obviously.
Yep.
It would seem abnormal if there weren't a lot of books.
Is this where you write, by the way? Is this where you sit and write?
Yes, right here where I am right now.
Seems very comfortable.
It is. I look out. There's a creek outside, which is a little unusual in central Arizona, a year-round creek.
Did you have to dig that creek yourself?
No, that was the forces of science did that for me.
Very nice.
And we got about 3 inches of snow the other night, which will make the guy in Finland laugh, I'm sure. But I have books. I have a lot of things from my travels. I've been to a lot of places, and I try to get one nice thing from every place where I go. And sometimes they inspire a story or a part of a story. There are paintings, cover paintings. Some of them are from my books. Some of them are from other people's books.
The viewers would like to know if you have anything like this Yoda here from Spin Master. This is a talking Yoda, or if you have a BB-8, especially in homage to the new film. Anything like that in the background? Any props? Is there anything that Lucas ever sent you and said, "I want you to have this lightsaber. Thank you for your contribution"?
No, I'm not a collector. Terribly foolish, of course. I'll tell you a quick story. After that meeting I talked about earlier between myself, George, Gary Kurtz, and Charlie Lippincott.
Don't even tell me he offered you one of the Stormtrooper helmets and you were like, no, it's okay. I don't want to take that home.
It's worse than that.
Uh-oh.
Maybe it's nice. After the meeting is over, now remember, this is well before the film is
Yeah.
There's a closet in this old bungalow on the Universal backlot. And Charlie says, "Come here a minute." We go over there. He opens up the closet, and it's piled up with all the stuff for the premiere. Program books, T-shirts, stickers, other promotional material. He says, "Do you want any of this stuff?" And so, of course, I said, "No, what do I want with any of this stuff? I don't want any of this stuff." But I did take a T-shirt, which is, I guess, one of the first piece of production art that Ralph McQuarrie ever did for the film. It's a triangle. It says Star Wars on it. And my wife has it.
Very cool.
In fact, she'd like to sell it, actually. If somebody's interested, they can email me on my website. But I didn't take any of that stuff. There was stuff I probably could have.
Yeah.
But it just didn't interest me.
It was also a different world. Like, people didn't do that back then, as much. They didn't do it as much. They weren't
unless you were Disney collectors. Disney collectors have been around since Mickey Mouse Watch.
Sure. Yes, absolutely.
No.
What about releasing the books on digital, and would that affect the release schedule if you didn't release a physical copy of books? And have you thought about that at this point?
Well, you mean as has happened with The Force Awakens?
Yes.
Well, the thing with The Force Awakens is that the ebook comes out the same day officially as the film, which is, I think, tomorrow.
Yes, that is correct. In the United States of America, yes.
Right, right. It premiered in Peru tonight, but uh, the the situation with that was, as far as I understand it, and I could be wrong, is that the people at Disney did not want the print version of the book to come out at the same time as the film, because of what I described earlier, the whole publication process being that if the book had to be printed and shipped and bound and sitting in warehouses waiting for distribution to bookstores, there would have been some fan somewhere who would have read the book, and if not digitized the whole thing and posted it online, would have revealed all of the spoilers.
Well,
and
I also
sensibly didn't want that.
Right, and I certainly understand that, but I also think that in my mind, you make more money with the digital copy as a publisher, I would think, because you're not actually printing a book and shipping it.
Well, that gets into the whole question of what is a fair pricing for ebooks.
Yeah.
Which has been a controversy ever since the first ebooks became commercially available. And probably, being in New York, you get somebody from the publishing industry to pop over there and discuss that. And I don't worry about it. I write the book.
No, I'm just saying, I understand, and I'm not asking you to get involved in that. And we've had publishers in studio and talked about all sorts of stuff like this. Pam Jaffe from HarperCollins has been here, and she's awesome. But yeah, I mean, it just, and we've had other publishers and stuff like that. But I mean, it just, obviously, I just had to say it. In my mind, it seems like, and maybe I'm wrong, you make more not having to actually print paper and ship it. I mean, that costs money as opposed to selling the book. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy. I don't need to get into the business of making books either, as far as a conversation at this moment.
The interesting thing about ebooks, the great thing about ebooks, because I collect books, or I used to collect books. The great thing to me about ebooks, aside from the fact they have a much lower ecology, print and imprint and all of that, is that nothing needs to go out of print anymore.
Right.
If you're the author of 40 books and you're 93 years old, the books you wrote when you were 25 can stay in print even if they sell 4 copies a year. And that's a wonderful thing.
Well, I think you have so many. I love digital books. To me, first of all, where am I going to put these books? We're just going to have shelves and shelves of books forever. I don't want to collect them. Not a collector. I have enough clutter in my life. Then I'm a germaphobe, so I don't like newspapers because I don't like the newspaper paper. I don't really love book paper. Some people love that. They're like, oh, the smell of a book, or they like the musty smell of a library book or a book that's been in the attic. I don't want any of that. I love a tablet. Give me the tablet. Let me read the book digitally. I'm sure there are plenty of germs on my screen anyway. I'll just wipe it with some whoosh or something else. But I love that idea, and I love what you're saying. I could have 10 books on here, number one, 100, whatever it is, 1,000. Number two, your book never has to go out of print. I mean, I remember, even you talk about the music business, walking into a music store in the early 90s and asking for something that was from the 70s and not being able to find it because, oh, well, we can order it for you. What, you got to order it for me? You don't have it? Well, we sell 4 copies a year, and we've sold those 4 copies. And it's the same kind of thing. And the most frustrating thing I've ever experienced is walking into a store and being like, I want that book. Oh, we don't have it. Or it's not in print anymore. And then I'm a guy, if I'm going to read a book or have a CD, it's got to be new. I don't want a used one because I'm a germaphobe. So for me, and again, the environmental impact. I mean, why would we ever print another book because of the environmental impact? Why should we cut down a tree when we don't have to? There's no cutting down a tree when I get your books on my iPad or my Surface Pro or whatever the heck we got it on.
Well, for right now, there's still people who like books in print too, but one of these days, that will be the way it is. The only people I think who will have books on paper will be collectors.
Yeah.
And if you live in a $6 million, 200 square foot loft in Manhattan, you don't have room for printed books either.
Right. That's what I'm saying is, it doesn't matter. You still don't have room. You're still going to run out of room. Why? I have some books that people have autographed in my office that they've sent me. I interview you, you send me an autographed book. That's great. I'm very happy. I'll put that displayed in my office. But I don't need to have every book I've ever written. We don't have enough room in the studio for it, let alone my house.
Right.
And it doesn't mean anything. To me, anyway. I get it if you collect books. I'm not knocking it.
It's hard to get an ebook signed.
It is. But if you want, you could sign my screen, and I'll just get a new computer.
And you clean it off. I know how that works.
Right, yeah, just, no, you do permanent ink. I'll be like, what is that stuff, Goo Gone? I'll be like, right on there with it. You've written so many books, it's hard to keep track. I mean, I think everybody's just got to go to your website, alandeanfoster.com. Check it all out, keep up with you. Email if they want to buy your wife's Star Wars shirt. It's now your wife's shirt, I guess. What do you think that thing is worth, by the way, to a Star Wars fan?
I haven't got a clue. I'm not a collector of that stuff. I don't have a single movie prop in the house.
I kind of feel like,
no idea.
I kind of feel like Digital Phil in Texas, who's one of the Terrifics, would pay like, a couple grand for that, easy. Like maybe $2,500, $3,000.
We'll see. If anybody does, I'll let you know.
Yeah, please. I would love. I mean, I'm always the guy who's so amazed when they're like, the Holness Wagner card just went for $1.5 million. I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah, I'm amazed. It's a little piece of cardboard. I mean, come on, it's not a Fabergé egg.
Yeah, there was no. I mean, at least with the Fabergé egg, somebody by hand made all this work, a watch that something, anything that's been created, that's a masterpiece, that's a one-off. Fine, but you're talking a piece of card. It was somebody took a photograph, they printed that on a piece of cardboard, and now, yeah, I don't get it. I actually have a baseball card collection. It's small. It's like the size of this thing, this computer, and I'm saving it for my son one day. I don't know. And I just noticed a couple weeks ago somebody said that a Ricky Henderson rookie card, which I happen to have, is worth like 20 grand, 15 to 20 grand. And I was like, I'm selling it. I mean, I'll sell it. Like, it's not worth that to me. It turned out to be a hoax. Somebody put it up on eBay thinking that if they could trick people into thinking that they could drive the market up. Apparently, it was a big hoax.
Collector sapiens is a separate species.
Yes, but here's an idea. Somebody says there's got to be an app that we can create, somebody can create, to make you be able to sign digital books, which would be cool,
Yeah, it's not the same, though.
Why do people want an autograph anyway, though? Have you ever understood this? I know you sign them all the time, and I'm sure you're glad to do it. You got fans. I've been asked. I'm happy to do it. I have, we have fans. The Terrifics. They're wonderful. I never understand what it means. Like, what? You have my signature on a T-shirt. Like, what?
Well, money aside.
Yeah.
Value that it adds apparently aside. The only thing I've ever been able to think of is it establishes a personal connection between you and the author or the ball player.
Wouldn't it be cooler to have a selfie, though? Like you and I would take a selfie, then.
Yeah, it would be, but selfies are fairly recent phenomenon.
All right, that's true. You know what? Let's do this. I don't know. I just thought of this. Let's get a selfie right now, you and me. I'm gonna.
All right.
How about that? I'll get you on this. Here we go. Oh, I got you on the big screen. This is great. You're gonna see this. I'm gonna send this to you. We'll put it up for the Terrifics. We just did a selfie together. That's
Science
phenomenal.
marches on.
Yes, we just did our first, that's a selfie we just did. That's awesome.
If you tried to explain that to somebody in Middle Europe 500 years ago, they'd burn you as a witch.
What are you talking about? They etched it out on the cave wall. Are you kidding? It was like, hey, this is me and Barbara, and look, there's the selfie we took 100 years ago.
That's an interesting question. It's why aren't there any, Paleolithic selfies? Why are they all just animals?
Yeah, that is a good question. It's because they didn't have a mirror to look in. They didn't know what they looked like.
Yeah, or the guy was bad. He said, no, that's no good. I'll do it again. I'll redo it tomorrow.
What do you do for fun? By the way, I see you have a cat. What's your cat's name?
Well, we have 8 cats.
8 cats?
Yeah.
Does that
all
get...
indoor because the coyotes would get them.
Otherwise. Yes, that's true. Do you have a lot of coyotes?
There were 2 in the front. There was one 6 feet away from the front door this morning when I got up.
Does that scare you ever?
What?
Does that scare you ever? Or you just take out the lightsaber?
No, I go outside and yell, get out of here. Coyote, go. There's so many rodents around here. Chipmunks, ground squirrels, rabbits. Coyotes don't have to bother with anything else around here.
Yeah.
I might take the occasional chihuahua or poodle, but it's not like Central Park.
Now, but you have 8 cats. I mean, that's nice. You've given a home to 8 cats. To me, I don't know if I could handle that. 8. Wow.
Well, we have a decent-sized house. We don't let them outside. They're all rescued animals.
Oh, that's wonderful.
All of our dogs and cats over the years have been rescued animals, and we've never had a bad one. One year I wrote a book called Catalyst.
Very cool.
Where we see that cats really are the secret masters of the universe.
I like that idea.
It's a small part of the book, but I wanted to do it for the cats.
I like that, and I like that you have rescued all the animals. I think that's very special. My wife and I have rescued the animals we have. We have a dog now named Nikki. We had a dog named Lexi. And I think it's the best way to do it because there are a lot of animals out there that need homes. So I think that's cool. This cat in the background right behind you, his name?
That's Stubbs. He's 15, so he's the only one in the study.
Wow, very nice. Very nice. All right, what do you do for fun?
Well, I've always traveled.
Yeah.
I always told people that I write to travel. I don't travel to write, per se. And I'm a competitive power lifter.
No, you're not. Are you really?
Yes. I
Wow.
actually, I have 2 current, 1 world and 2 state records. In my age and weight group, you got to understand, in my age group, most of my competition is dead.
Oh, I don't know about that. You're not that old. What are you, 64, 65?
69.
69 still. Most of your competition's not dead. They're just maybe not lifting, powerlifting. All right, so you're 69. When did you start powerlifting?
Well, I've lifted for about 30 years because I figure if you do what I do, and I was never any kind of an athlete in school, but if you do what I do, you're just sitting all day.
Right.
You get 0 exercise. So I wanted something that I looked around for something I could do until I dropped dead. It came down to swimming, golf, and weightlifting.
And you didn't pick golf because you need 4 hours to do that.
No, I didn't pick golf because I don't consider it exercise.
I would agree.
I've seen guys sweat more at chess matches. Swimming I love to do, but I like to swim in the ocean. I was raised in LA, and the idea of going to a YMCA pool with 400 kids doesn't appeal to me.
Yeah.
And that left powerlifting, and you'd see pictures of people who were, my age, and from the neck up they look their age, and from the neck down they all look 30, 35.
So how buff are you?
I'm not buff at all. Powerlifting is very different from bodybuilding.
No, I understand, but you still have to be in good shape. I mean, you have to be very strong.
Well, that's what powerlifting is. And
how much can you lift?
Right now, rotator cuff, 5 months I haven't been in the gym. I can't lift anything.
Well, okay.
I can move the mouse around. But
7 months ago, how much could you lift?
I had a meet in March. I did 265 on the bench.
Oh my God, 265? That's like 2 of me almost. I could not lift 265. Well, we have a cargo case downstairs. It's 100 pounds. I know because it goes on the airplane. And I have to go, hey, Adam, hey, Greg, can you guys help me move this? And they just take like that. 100
probably
pounds.
Twice as big as you, too. So it's, it's not hard to lift 300 pounds if you weigh 300 pounds.
That is unbelievable.
But it's like anything else. It's if you work at it. I mean, I've been lifting for 30 years, but I didn't start competing until 7 years ago. But I've been lifting for 30 years. And if you do something at least 2-3 times a week, and you do it for a long time, you're bound to get reasonably competent at it. I call it Revenge of the Nerds.
I love it. I love it, which was a great movie, by the way. But I love that. And did you know you always wanted to be a writer? Were you like, hey, I'm in high school and I want to be a writer? I mean, did you know that this was going to be your career path?
No, I never gave it a thought. I was supposed to be a lawyer. There were lawyers in the family. All of my the tests they give you in school, aptitude tests, said be a lawyer, be a lawyer. It was all the way from the 7th grade on. So I went to UCLA. I went to the political science department to do pre-law. My senior year at UCLA, I discovered the greatest racket in university education, which is that you take film history courses. You go in, the professor talks for 15 minutes, and you watch Buster Keaton for 3.5 hours, 4 units. I thought this is the same as 4 units of physics. So I thought, this is great. So I took a lot of film history courses, and I took some writing courses because I'd always been a facile writer. I was probably the only kid in my high school who looked forward to essay tests. But I never gave any thought to being a professional writer. But I got into the UCLA Graduate Film School with the idea that then I'd go to law school.
Yeah.
And while I was
is that what you really thought, or did you sell that to your folks? Because I feel like that's a sales pitch to your folks.
It wasn't easy going in saying, no, I'm not going to USC Law School where I've been admitted. I'm going to go to UCLA Graduate Film School and try to be a writer. There was, it was like the vacuum of space. Instant silence, nothing.
Consequently, your sales pitch could have included, look, when I'm a lawyer, I'm going to have to do a lot of writing, so this isn't bad training. And some of it might be fiction that has to seem really realistic, so this could be great for me.
Now, that would have required me to be clever instead of frightened.
See, that's what I would have done. That would have been my pitch.
No, no, you're a better salesman than I am. But they were very supportive, and it all worked out. I sold a couple of short stories while I was at UCLA as a
Wow.
grad student, and then before I went on active duty in the Army, basic training.
Thank you so much. I can't thank you enough. Thank you for your service. I didn't know you served.
No, no, no. I was only in the active reserve. Don't give me.
That's
credit
okay.
where
You
credit
still were ready. You were ready to go.
Yeah, I suppose I was. But anyway, while I was doing that, I had just finished my first novel. I had a choice between finishing another story or finishing my first novel before I went in the Army. And after 6 months, I came out and it had sold the Valentine books.
Wow.
And I thought, this beats the hell out of getting up early in the morning and putting on a suit and a tie and looking up precedents for the rest of my life. Let's give it a shot, see what happens. And this is what happened.
Wow, that's amazing. That's phenomenal. And I imagine that the Star Wars books. You still are you writing Star Wars books still?
Well, I wrote one original novel, which is a bridge novel between episode 1 and 2,
Okay.
called The Approaching Storm. They asked me for years, did I want to write more spin-off books, and I really didn't want to do what Chewbacca's uncle was up to.
But people would buy that. That's the amazing thing. People would buy it. But I like that you're saying, like, I know people would buy it. I know I could cash in by doing that. And that's nice. But, it's not what I want to do. And that's not fulfilling. I've done something I think is really well done. I'm happy and proud of it. I got paid. I'm comfortable with what I got paid for and maybe continue to get paid for it. And I'm going to continue to do my own thing. I'm not going to just take this to ring the register.
No, because it was kind of like a spin-off of a spin-off.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. But when they asked if I'd be interested in doing the novelization of the new film, I thought, well, first I wanted to know who was doing. Well, I knew Abrams was doing it, and I'd already novelized 2 of JJ's films, the 2 reboots of Star Trek. Did the book version of both of those, and I love it. He's a terrific filmmaker. He's a fan who makes movies, and he's really good at it.
I love this J.J. Abrams. That's why I think this is going to be so good and I'm so excited about it. And like I said, to me, this is going to be the tipping point. But to me, because it's J.J. Abrams, because Disney got their hands on it, it's going to go like this. And I love J.J. Abrams because I think he's so creative. Like, I don't know if you watched Fringe, but I thought that was one of the best television, especially sci-fi television series I've ever seen. And I thought it was super creative. And that was one of his.
Well, if you can be a fan and a professional at the same time, there's nothing better.
Yeah.
When I do a novelization, I always tell people it's a combination of a professional writer and the 14-year-old kid sitting in the back of the theater with his friends making rude comments about the lousy special effects. So when I'm doing the book version of a film, I'm a combination of those 2 things.
Well, I think it's a good combination, as you pointed out. I want everybody to go to AlanDeanFoster.com. You're going to find out a whole lot more about Alan. Of course, Alan, you're welcome anytime on BeTerrific. I want to thank you so much for your time today and for joining us, and I'd love to have you on again. I'm glad we finally made it happen. I got to thank Alexei and Rabid Fanboy, because RabidFanboy.com, because he made it happen. He stuck with it, and you did too. I mean, it was not easy. We had some Skype issues Monday and Tuesday, and even today we had some Skype issues. Skype is a wonderful service, but also it's an imperfect service. It's technology for you. Now you could write about that, Alan.
Yeah, well,
in the future, it works perfectly, right?
In the future, everything. Well, it depends on the future you're looking at.
Do you remember? I watched the Jetsons. I love the Jetsons. Do you remember George ever being like, "I can't get the video phone to work"? It always worked.
I'm a big animation fan. I never could watch the later Hanna-Barbera stuff because all I saw when I turned on something like the Jetsons or Yogi Bear was the great Tom and Jerry cartoons that were fully animated.
Yes.
That they did years before. But, the Jetsons, everything was clean.
Yes.
You didn't see any dirt in the Jetsons. And real science fiction, what can I say? You see schmutz.
Right. You got to. Do you have a favorite science fiction movie of all time?
Yes.
Is it Star Wars?
Forbidden Planet, 1956 MGM.
Wow.
First film with an all-electronic music score.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's
Not only that,
thing.
the composers wouldn't let him nominated for an Oscar for best score because they said it's not music. And that shows you another way how times have changed.
Of course, it's ridiculous. They probably also, come on, look at what it took for hip hop to be considered music. By the way, just so everybody knows, you also have the story credit for Star Trek: The Motion Picture and 10 books that were based on the animated Star Trek series. So I've never been a Trekkie. I don't even understand it. I don't even know what to say about it. But I'm a guy who's honest. That's all I can say about it. Is I'm not going to sit here and lie to the audience and tell them I love Star Trek. But I know that a lot of the Terrifics love Star Trek, and so I want them to know that tidbit. Because of that, I've seen one Star Trek film. I could not stand it. I could not wait to get out of the theater, and I couldn't ask you any questions about it. I mean, I could, but they wouldn't be legitimate or sincere, so I shied away from it. But I want people to know you did it, which obviously is a tremendous credit as well. And you've got a ton of really great original stories, a lot of other stuff as well. But, everybody should check you out, alandeanfoster.com. Thank you so much for joining us. Enjoy, The Force Awakens and the next few Star Wars films. I was actually on a movie set recently and got to meet the director who will be the director of the next Star Wars film, which they start shooting soon. He was doing a film with a young actress everybody knows, Naomi Watts, and I was on set with those guys, and it was pretty amazing. He had just finished Jurassic World. So again, you have this great lineup, and J.J. Abrams is going to keep his hands in the mix and his ideas in his mind and produce. I think you've just got, again, up, only up. And thank you for telling us some great stories today. I think they were phenomenal.
I enjoyed it very much, Mike.
You're awesome. All right, you guys are awesome. You're the Terrifics. That is it for today. We're way over time, but we wanted to keep going because there was so much good stuff. I didn't get to all your questions, and I'm sorry, but we had some good ones in there. We'll see you again tomorrow. Until next time, I'm Michael Artsis. Thanks so much for watching. Be terrific.